Last night, a gunman opened fire on a large crowd at a country music concert in Las Vegas, Nevada. He brutally murdered more than 50 people and wounded hundreds more. It was an act of pure evil.
That was the president addressing the nation this morning and calling for unity and peace after the Las Vegas shooting. Both the White House and Congress observed moments of silence in honor of the victims of the shooting. President Trump will visit Las Vegas on Wednesday, where he will meet with law enforcement, first responders, and the families of victims. Here's the White House press secretary on whether the shooting will have any impact on the president's position on gun control.
This is an unspeakable tragedy. Today is a day for consoling the survivors and mourning those we lost. Our thoughts and prayers are certainly with all of those individuals. There's a time and place for a political debate, but now is the time to unite as a country. There's currently an open and ongoing law enforcement investigation. A motive is yet to be determined, and it would be premature for us to discuss policy when we don't fully know all the facts or what took place last night.
We're joined now by MSNBC's Rachel Maddow and Chris Hayes, and it's another day for thoughts and prayers.
Yeah. Well, there's something, I mean, watching Sarah Huckabee Sanders say that, I'm taken back to being in Orlando and the horrible trauma of the aftermath of the Pulse shooting, and watching then candidate Trump the day after that shooting call on a full ban of 1 billion people from coming to the country. Now, there was no sense then that it was too early. Today was a day for consoling victims, that there was an ongoing law enforcement investigation, that we need to get the facts. All of the and some of those, to be clear, are totally reasonable things to say, particularly about the fact there's an ongoing law enforcement.
Yes.
You know, but that is a standard, I have to say, it's almost kind of maddening actually to watch that, because that is a standard that is extremely unevenly applied by this White House, which has jumped out to call things like the Egypt air flight terrorism that turned out not to be, that has run with the first reports of all sorts of things when they thought they could put points on the board politically, and it's a very different Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
So you're saying they're happy to acknowledge that there are appropriate policy responses to mass shootings and massacres, except when...
Right, when it didn't fit, right, it doesn't fit into the sort of box that they have. And we've seen it time and time again, and it's actually been a really, to me, unnerving tendency of the president to tweet about things happening that appear to be acts by, say, ISIS or jihadis of some sort, minutes into it, an hour into it, while people are figuring out what exactly happened. Yeah. You see all of a sudden this restraint now that doesn't check that box.
It's because it's about guns. It's because the only apparent... Right. I mean...
The only thing we know for sure.
The only thing we know for sure. And the thing that seems different about this, and I mean different even compared to Pulse, different even compared to Sandy Hook, different even compared to Virginia Tech, is that this killer appears to have put together an arsenal that seems to have been sort of maxing out what you can do with legal weaponry.
Yes.
And we still don't know about the question about what sounded like automatic weapons fire. We still don't know. That we have lots of suppositions in terms of whether he got his hands on an automatic weapon, whether he modified some automatic weapons to make it fire like an automatic, and what that means. But the sheer number of guns, I mean, what we just got at the press conference, right?
They updated the number.
Yeah, in the hotel room, 23 guns at his property in Mesquite, another 19 guns. We are told through other reporting sources that those were all long guns, it was all rifles there. If he was using weird aftermarket modifications on those guns, one of the problems for that, for somebody who wants to create maximum mayhem using those drum magazines or those other modifications, is that they make your gun glitchy. Well, you can solve that if you can have 20 of them, because then as soon as one misfires, you grab another. As soon as one misfires, you grab another. That makes the financial aspect here very interesting. It makes the technological aspect here very interesting in terms of what kinds of weapons he had access to, and it makes the policy question very, very clearly guns. Even before we know about his motivation or any connections he had to anybody else. And we, as a country, have decided you can't talk about guns, at least at the federal level. And so it leaves us mute in terms of whether or not we can have a practical discussion.
Well, and politically now, the other thing that Republicans anyway in Congress don't want to talk about is silencers. They were moving legislatively, possibly as early as next week, toward deregulating silencers, which would have made this even worse, because we just heard Buzz Brainerd telling us they didn't think it was gunshots at first. It took them a long time to realize it was gunshots. If there had been any kind of silencing capacity on this, what would it have taken? For that? They would have to see the bodies be falling before they'd have any sense of it at all. But the Republicans apparently are pulling down that effort to deregulate silencers. So that's some movement.
There's been a lot of disinformation, not just misinformation, but disinformation about that today. We ended up, when the NRA started saying stuff about how silencers wouldn't have made any difference here in terms of being able to find the shooter and all this stuff, we ended up calling gun ranges and people who deal with, the kind of exotic weapons that you can pay money to shoot around here. We just called people locally and talked to them about that, and everybody told us, oh yeah, you can put silencers in that kind of a weapon. It would have made a huge difference. Why you would need silencers in this country instead of just earplugs to protect your hearing, it remains something that isn't been subject to rational debate.
Chris.
There's also Rachel and I have been talking about this. There's just an inscrutability to this. The mental categories that we've erected that we have now come to apply to events like this, which happen with a frequency in the United States, they happen nowhere else in the world, have certain boxes that we look for. So, the idea that it would be a terrorist attack from ISIS, the idea that this was someone who's mentally disturbed or who had red flags or had social media posts or some process of sort of rage-filled dissent that happened. We'll learn more, but there is, at one level, there's a sort of desire to understand the motivation to make the event make sense. At some level, there's like a just essential inscrutability about whatever the motivation will be to do. Standing here and looking at what this person did is so ghastly and so horrible, and took such a combination of planning and malevolence without any apparent animating reason. That it is,
at least that we know of.
That at least at this point, it feels like it flummoxes my capacity to conceptualized.
One of the people on that stage last night, was Caleb Keeter, one of the musicians in one of the bands. He today has said, I have been a lifelong proponent of the Second Amendment, a very strong Second Amendment supporter. And he said, I cannot express how wrong I was. He has completely reversed himself on the Second Amendment publicly today. And what's really surprising about that is we normally don't have something like that to report after
no
one
one
of these
ever
events.
changes their mind.
We can't bring you the prominent person or even the person involved who changes their mind about it. It's just an amazing thing.
There was a man who tried to murder a dozen Republican members of Congress just several months ago.
Yes.
And there was they were on the, they were there. They were on the receiving end of this, almost murdered one of the most prominent Republicans in Congress, and there was nothing like that. And the thing that Keeler said that I think is key here also is one of the most perverse notions in this conversation, taking aside all the policy rationales and the legal questions of the Second Amendment, is some notion that if people have guns, then they will stop things like
that
this.
if there had been more guns at that concert. And he addresses that
specifically to say,
he says, there are people who have concealed carry licenses, there were guns on our tour buses, it's all useless because of the insane amount of firepower that he was able to put together. This is a technology story, and if there's going to be anything other than our usual impotence on this story, it's going to be a discussion about the technology that made this possible on a policy level. And if we forgo that here, I don't know when we're going to do it.
Rachel, Chris, thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate you joining the discussion. Thank you very much. Pal, thank you for being here.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.